Alex Vogel, who previously served as chief counsel to Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist and former general counsel for the National Republican Senatorial Committee. And a very happy birthday to you, Alex.
Oh, thank you, Larry. Appreciate it.
All right, let's get into it. Over the weekend, Donald Trump commuted the sentence of Roger Stone. This caused an uproar in some circles. What'd you make of that move?
So a couple of things. A lot's been made about this and other commutations or pardons or potential pardons from President Trump. Anytime a president commutes or pardons the sentence of someone that he knows or has a relationship with politically or otherwise, it gets attention. I did a little digging just to see from a scale perspective. I think the president has commuted or pardoned 36 people thus far. That's pretty low by any modern standard. I think Obama was 1,500 or so. Bill Clinton was close to 1,000 people. And remember, and I don't mean to pick on them because my own constitutional view of presidential power in this regard is quite broad, but I don't recall quite this level of uproar when President Clinton pardoned Roger Clinton, his brother, or Rostenkowski, who he certainly had a political relationship with. So this kind of exercise of presidential power feels pretty normal to me, notwithstanding all the attention.
But basically, Stone was convicted of lying for the president.
That's correct. And that is certainly one of the reasons that it's getting the attention and criticism that it has. But again, the constitutional power of a president in this regard is not limited to those divorced or separated from himself. There has been open debate over whether presidents can pardon themselves. But other than that, that authority is pretty broad.
What do you make of the uproar over William Barr? Justice Department officials quitting. A lot of people saying that he's just a lapdog for the president.
There's no doubt that trying to be attorney general in this environment is a challenge. It's interesting, a lot of those same voices, even from the other side of the aisle, were quite pleased when General Barr came in because they knew him from his past service and really viewed him as a non-political, notwithstanding these are obviously political appointments, but viewed him as a straight shooter and as an institutionalist. And I don't think anything he has done is really inconsistent with that. I think the nature of the debate right now, whether it's around policies or people, is such that being the Attorney General at this point in time, there's almost no way for him to escape that. I think he's shown strong independence and has done a really good job.
Late last month, the Senate confirmed Donald Trump's 200th nominee to a lifetime seat on the federal bench. Will the fast tracking of conservative judges be Trump's biggest legacy?
Well, lifetime judicial appointments generally are all presidents' biggest legacies. There's no doubt that the president and people around him understood from the beginning of his presidency that one of the most impactful things he could do, far exceeding his own time in office, is those judicial slots. And frankly, a lot of the slowdown in recent years came to a halt with some Senate rules changes, and a lot of people on the other side, even ones who were frustrated at President Obama's inability to get his folks in, were concerned at the time that someday when they weren't in power, this would allow for much more rapid processing. And Leader McConnell made no secret of the fact that he intended to move as many qualified judges as he could, and he has done so. The vacancy list, which used to be in the hundreds, is now effectively gone. So there's no doubt it was a priority. There's no doubt that it is one of those ways that this president, like all presidents, if they choose to do so, really can impact policy for a long time. And whether those are district court slots or others, they will indeed impact the environment for a long time, regardless of who's president.
Being honest about it, how do you rate Trump's chances for a second term?
A couple of thoughts on how that's going. I know there's lots of talk now that about polling and advantages that the vice president has going up against President Trump in November. Two things I think are true. One, the electorate is exceedingly volatile right now. If 3 or 4 months ago we had had a conversation about all the things that would transpire between then and now, I think you would have thought we were nuts. And I think a lot will probably happen, although hopefully less dramatic, between now and November. If the economy is on a good path and COVID seems like it is reasonably under control, I think the president's chances are quite good. Again, the president still, even with all these challenges, polls higher than Vice President Biden on the key metric of handling the economy.
There's some who say the president is acting as if this pandemic is hurting him.
There is certainly a personalization of the presidency that this president engages in that's very different than others before him, and in many ways may not serve him well as a messaging matter. A lot of people will say that even non-partisan voters will say they wish they heard more we and a little less I from this president. I think that's true with COVID as well. Where the president, again, personalizes things that are really national issues, and he'd be better served to frame it in a broader context.
He was late to the fence in COVID, wasn't he?
So the answer is we don't really know. Certainly, you look back now, not only at the things the president said, but that lots of people said, and we all thought about where this was going to go. You can criticize those. Many people criticized him for shutting down travel with China when he did, because they felt it wasn't warranted. I don't know if there's a right way to respond to effectively an unprecedented event.
He finally wore a mask over the past weekend. Frankly, shouldn't he have led the country when everyone else is telling you to wear a mask? Shouldn't the president wear a mask?
Absolutely. I was glad to see that he wore one. I think it's a silly issue for him or for any leader ultimately to fight back on. It's clear from the health experts and from talking to ordinary Americans, this should not be a political issue.
How about his trade war with China? Is he winning or losing?
So I think the answer is he's winning if the test is it putting pressure on China ultimately to change their policies. He is the first president in modern history to be willing to actually have that fight. Lots of rhetoric on this, but the president and Mr. Navarro and others, Bob Lighthizer at USTR, have aggressively pushed that fight in a way that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on China. Frankly, it's what helped us get to the phase one trade deal we have. There has been some pain inflicted on U.S. consumers and U.S. businesses as well, but certainly the hope is that in the longer term, it actually gives us an opportunity to address some of these issues that everybody agrees need to be addressed between us and China.
Do you worry about support from the farmers who basically helped elect Trump? You think they're worried over this trade deal that they might go Biden?
I think what they are concerned about is they don't want to see China use some of its ability to slow down or slow walk some of the phase one promised agricultural purchases in a way that has a political impact. I think the president otherwise feels pretty comfortable given the pain that farmers had to endure with his response and his efforts to help. But again, a lot of it depends on, at this point, China continuing and following through on their phase one agreements for ag purchases.
Alex, are you concerned about the Republicans retaining the Senate?
If the polling continues to go badly for the president, there is no doubt it can have a negative impact on some of these state races as well. That doesn't mean that I think places like Texas or Senate races in places like Kentucky are actually in play. I think you're going to have a huge turnout and mobilization effort from both sides in a presidential. Generally speaking, the president, the person who wins that, is going to have some coattails, whether those are massive or small. I think a lot of people still, regardless of how they feel about the president, understand that it's important to have divided government.
It is, though, the election a referendum on Trump, isn't it?
It is. At the end of the day, anytime you're an incumbent and you're running for reelection, it is theoretically about you. What's fascinating is, given the issue set, we're now talking about pandemics and race relations and a whole lot of other things that, frankly, now that this is a binary choice between Trump and Biden, it brings in Biden to the equation. And it allows for much more of a comparison between Biden's record and performance and the president's record and performance. There will still be ultimately a referendum on Donald Trump. But I think a lot of those issues and the fights that we're having right now, many of those will be uncomfortable for Biden because they're not really where he has been for the last 50 years as a leader and as a politician.
You live in Virginia. What did you make of some statues coming down?
Honestly, it's very jarring. Not just here in Virginia, but around the country. I certainly understand the anger that swelled out of the murder of George Floyd and a lot of those issues. It has now gotten to the point, though, if you want to talk about having statues removed in Richmond or San Francisco, where I grew up, wherever, that should be a process. We don't live in a country where you should go out and throw ropes around things and drag them down in the middle of a riot. That's not a way to do that. I also think some of it, frankly, has just become rank destructive behavior. When you're pulling down the Christopher Columbus statue, when you're pulling down Ulysses S. Grant, for example, in San Francisco, it's clear this is not about symbols of slavery. So while I think the anger and the urgency is completely legitimate, I do wish people would follow a process to have that conversation. Because otherwise, not only doesn't it further the debate, it's just a chaotic removal of history, and almost by definition, no one feels good about that.
Finally, how are you doing during the pandemic?
We're doing well. I have 6 kids, and frankly, the biggest challenge was navigating them through the school process, only to find themselves in a summer with no camps or other things. But I feel really fortunate that we're all happy and healthy.
Alex, always great talking to you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Larry. Talk soon.